and welcome to Get the Table, another wrestling roundtable discussion podcast with myself, Adam Wilborn, and the Dadley Boyz of WhatCulture here to discuss another burning wrestling issue. But before we get into it, if you're a fan of this sort of thing, make sure you subscribe to WhatCulture Wrestling on either iTunes, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts from, for daily wrestling podcasts where we review Raw, SmackDown, the Wednesday night war between AEW and NXT pay-per-views. We have interviews, more roundtable discussions like this one, and a roundup of the week complete with a bloody good quiz, of course, on WrestleCulture. But as I said, joined by Michael Hamflett and Michael Sidgwick. And gents, we are gathered here today to talk about wrestling in 2020, and specifically the best and the worst case scenarios for wrestling next year. Michael Sidgwick, how are you feeling about 2020?
Terrified. Terrified. If you look at how 2019 started, it were literally almost to like the day with a formation rally for this thing called All Elite Wrestling, the slogan behind which was change the world. You haven't really heard those words in the lexicon for months and months and months and months at this point. It just feels like early installation weirdness, very over-ambitious, and it feels like I still think it's absolutely great. I think the storytelling's great. I think the wrestling's great. I think the promos are just such refreshing tonic for decades of crap, and yet it's failed to make a significant impression. Every time we need to say this, we caveat it with TNT are probably overjoyed with the numbers. It's performing above projections for the people that matter, not three guys on an admittedly exceptional podcast. But at the same time, it just felt like a narrative was happening. The narrative willed AEW into existence. It's impossible for WWE to be that bad, and more to the point, that antagonistic about who it pushed, who they didn't push, what they thought of the fans, cancelling matches, just bait and switching TV matches, cancelling house shows, killing towns, all the rest of it. It just felt like AEW needed to happen. And the fact that it's only happening within niche hardcore fan circles, to me, is a tremendous disappointment because, as I've said this before, if not AEW, then what? It's a perfect storm of change, and it's not really changing anything. Billionaire-funded competition. That billionaire is funding the Act, the Stable, Omega, and the Young Bucks, who more than anyone in the independent circuit over the last 2 decades have proven themselves actual calculable draws through the mega houses they drew in ROH, all the hot topic stuff, all the buzz and the numbers are generated on being the elite, how much they raised the profile of New Japan Pro Wrestling in the US. You've got Cody, who, I'm sorry, people will say that I'm being pedantic and a stickler, is kind of a genius when it comes to storytelling, putting stories together, building programs, marketing. It just feels like with those 5 guys at the helm, if they can't make something bigger than TNA was in 2011, then this industry is in serious, serious trouble.
I don't know if it's a case of, I mean, my criticism of AEW was from that exact play, that January sort of big rallying cry that you described, because immediately I had these like reminders of TNA. I think the next day I came and I was like, I don't know exactly what I was wanting, but what I felt like I was getting was Hulk Hogan's Big Bang moment in TNA. Ridiculous comparisons, I know, and like my daft Jeff Jarrett and Triple H, our Cody Rhodes ones are for another conversation, but there was a bigger picture thing that I was never
We've had
getting.
the conversation.
Yeah, was a bigger picture thing from AEW that hasn't, been arrived upon yet. The ways they could have made changes, and we're all going to sound like boring old socialists, would have been things like healthcare and better contracts, and
that doesn't matter to the popularity of the product.
That's true. Yeah, that's
what I'm
but
interested
I suppose what I'm suggesting there is like that's foundational change with which a silly old wrestling show can still be a quality wrestling show under better foundations, and maybe that's what generates change. I dare say they weren't expecting to one of the results of AEW probably wasn't going to be, oh, do you know what we're going to do? We're going to re-energize NXT, because of an incredibly cynical but in hindsight quite brilliant bit of gamesmanship from WWE to put that against on Wednesday night. It made for a great Wednesday, but it hasn't made for a great alternative. Instead, what you've got is just a different night of wrestling where our little sect of fans are coming together to cheer rather than everybody's on the AEW bus. They've lost that, not through any fault of their own.
If you think about it as well, sorry Wilborn, I'll stop interjecting momentarily, but kind of exactly where we started. All In was the celebration of hardcore fans wrestling. It was the attempt to prove that this amazing thing could be bigger than it is, because it very much deserves to be. And yet, now that's been marginalised to this little Wednesday night thing that us geeks get really excited about, and then it doesn't really penetrate like the casual fans, much less even Raw's remaining core base. Just feels like we're literally back where we started in 2018. We've got this festival of hardcore fans, but it's just this thing that doesn't really extend beyond itself.
It's probably not. I think it'd be daft to like throw in the towel on AEW as a like a proven entity, but also something that can be more successful than it already is. You know, it only took one. I say only took one massive angle for WCW after so many weeks of going nip and tuck with Raw to like race ahead and become the biggest wrestling company in the world. I appreciate they were dealing with a very different WWE than the one that you face now, but also like you do have two billionaires going against one another. If for whatever reason Tony Khan or his father wanted to put infrastructure unlike anything we've ever seen behind a wrestling company before, he could do it. If there was metrics that he sees that we don't, that makes him think, let's double down on this, let's treble down on this, then that could be 2020's answer to this slight malaise that's occurred amongst like the probably AEW, I don't want to say like purists in a negative way, but like hopefuls, people that were looking for utopia. I welcome utopia across all things, let alone pro wrestling, and I don't think that's necessarily gone away yet. I just think they've got to now adapt to how the landscape's changed in a way they didn't see.
Could 2020 be the year that Vince finally steps away from WWE? XFL is going to be launching. We've seen him, not be at TLC because of these other commitments. Could he finally, loosen that grip on the reins a little bit, shall we say? And I don't mean Roman by that.
He doesn't know how to loosen grips on reins. He just grows an additional hand to grab that rein. But I'm still fascinated by XFL making a comeback. It's going to be weird, guys. It's going to be really strange that he's got a football league that has got a 2-year television deal. XFL, before a ball has been kicked or thrown, however they would say that in their parlance, is already more successful than the original XFL because it has a foothold. It has like a different kind of credibility than the first time around. That was like attitude era football. That was Vince, probably his arrogant worst. What that was to football was what the old WWF was to the WBF and bodybuilding. This is something entirely different. He set up Alpha Entertainment. He doesn't want his wrestling to be associated with it until ratings sag, and then all of a sudden we see footballers guest hosting Raw, and we see John Cena sent to a stadium on a helicopter or something like that. But who doesn't want to see that all play out? That madness, the madness of King Vince, is going to be another reason why fans, I believe, will still be driven to Wednesdays and will still be driven to quality wrestling over Raw and over SmackDown. Because look at SmackDown on Fox already. They've normalised $1 billion deal in 2 months. That nothing special is going to come from that 5 years with Fox. So let's see what daft stuff happens in the XFL that sends more people to Wednesdays.
People don't like it when you play armchair psychologist with Vince McMahon. You never met him a day in your life, as if you can't go to like a site of a historical atrocity and think, I wasn't there. Probably wasn't that bad. I wasn't there. How could he possibly say? Right? That being said, if you look at literally everything to do with Vince McMahon, the way he demands the scripts are written on behalf of his performers, the way he famously, and the actual people involved who were there have said this, screams down the headsets into the ears of his commentators to make sure his points are getting put across firmly, explicitly, and without any kind of confusion. The way he wants to control literally the landscape. Forget NXT UK, he wanted to buy out Tommy Dreamer's House of Hardcore, right? Everything that makes up the psychological profile of the man is one who's just insistent and obsessed with control. So he's never, ever, in my opinion, with his baby, WWE, going to voluntarily relinquish that.
What's some of your best and worst case scenarios for next year, Michael Hamflett?
I'd like to see more proper focus on the women's division, and the obvious and easy answer to that is Evolution 2. It was a huge, huge missed opportunity this year. That didn't happen, not least when they had a free SmackDown to use. What we got was great, which makes that a trickier argument because the NXT invasion was ideal. But what a tap-in that would have been had the wrestlers not been stuck on a plane. Why wasn't there some forward thinking months in advance to say, well, just let the wrestlers get home when they can, and we've got an entire roster with which to put together a sequel to what was the best pay-per-view of the prior year. It needs Evolution 2, but it needs a rethink beyond what they've done, which is they've said that here's some revolution, and they've said here's your main event, and they've said we have made changes, but they continue not really to show them. I'm not saying people still fight over men, but predominantly women only fight over a belt. So what you have is a rotation of one woman getting her turn at any given time, and that can't go on because nobody gets over. What happens is somebody gets over and then they disappear back into the background for months at a time. Think about how buzzed we were with Sasha Banks the moment she pulled off that purple wig the night after SummerSlam. She was instantly the top heel on Raw. She was instantly in a feud with Becky Lynch, and wasn't that really exciting? But there has to be a winner and a loser. So she loses, and then she fades into being Bayley's number 2 until they think of something else to do with her. That's not good enough, because Sasha Banks, up to maybe within the last 2 or 3 years, was probably considered one of the best all-rounders in the world. And that's going to happen to women more than it's going to happen to men because of the continued way that those women are marginalised on this main roster, on this bloated, bigger than ever main roster.
We often get accused of negativity on this podcast, so I'm going to ask you...
Just watch Raw, watch TLC. Seriously, what's your problem? What is your problem and how can you defend it?
But don't tell us why Bray's good because we just don't agree.
But with that in mind, what is the best case scenario for when you think of wrestling in 2020?
The best case scenario is Vince does actually leave, but I just can't actually believe it's going to happen. I would like to see, and I'm very worried about this, Paul Heyman's vision, no matter how it's inhibited or, diluted or regulated, I would like to see it come to fruition and actually make them realise, oh, hang on, a different kind of approach can work. Let's sort of flourish that, allow that to flourish. Because at the minute, it feels like, if you look at the ratings and the buzz and the crowd silence, it just feels like there are institutional problems that Paul Heyman can't or won't right around. It just feels like SmackDown's going through the exact same problem with Vince McMahon's famous henchman number 2 in his seat in Bruce Pritchard. It just feels like Heyman and Pritchard, who are just incredibly different in so many respects, they're all just kind of still doing the same job with the same results. It just feels like nothing's going to change.
Raw is like a long Brock Lesnar title run. Fundamentally, it's a beast that can't be killed, but then every now and then it's exciting, and that's kind of the best you can hope for. But that is going to lead me to a positive best case scenario. I'm willing to predict it and put the minuscule reputation I've got on this. I genuinely believe by the end of 2020, Wednesdays will be beating Monday Night Raw every week. I've got a really...
In totality?
Yeah. I can't suggest that NXT or AEW are going to go on a run so good that they're going to hit 2 million by themselves, but there has been dips and there has been peaks and troughs to this ratings war already on a Wednesday, but we're in that 1.5, 1.6 million wheelhouse, and then every now and then one's going to have a peak, and every now and then one show might break 1 million, and Raw has continued to decline over the prior few years. So not only do I believe that AEW and NXT will go in that direction, I believe Raw will continue to go in that one, and surpassing Raw is going to be a huge turning point, not just for Vince McMahon, who's going to look and he's going to panic and he's going to have to think Raw's, we talk about WWE being his baby. In spite of the SmackDown money, you kind of get the feeling Raw will always be his televisual baby. So he's going to look at that.
That's the longest running episode of
we need to do something about that.
Gunsmoke.
Beyond sending 40 stars a week there, because they can't do that every week. So that'll, in the same way that, AEW has driven change for the better for NXT, AEW and NXT's collective success will hopefully drive change for Raw. I know that sounds like blind, naive positivity, but numbers are actual metrics. Numbers are reasons for people to make changes. And once we pass that 2 million on Wednesdays, let that create a bit of panic.
If there's any justice, for Christ's sake, there should be, because between them, NXT and AEW have just got just really neat and hopefully in time effective booking philosophies that have served pro wrestling well for decades. They allow the expressive, creative nature of performers to flourish. They treat the fans with intelligence by crafting really well thought out, intricate, long-term storylines involving the performers that are actually getting the reactions. They're experimenting, and it just feels like Raw continuously punishes your foolish attempts to invest in it, and it just feels like, come on, Karma, do something with this, because Raw doesn't deserve to be popular than either show, let alone both of them combined.
To give a bit of balance, then, what's a worst case scenario for wrestling in 2020?
Just a little one for me. I really, really don't want NXT to leave Full Sail. I understand the arguments for how size and scale is supposed to represent success on a wrestling show, and if you're catching a casual fan, and I've been critical of AEW when they've not been catching casual fans, so I understand that old methods suggest that when a casual fan is flicking, they're going to want to see a big product rather than a smaller one, but I feel like there's weekly examples of why NXT benefits from just how much that crowd loves that product. I don't think it matters that they're in a smaller venue, because everyone looks bigger as a result. There's nothing worse than seeing your NXT fave rock up against a Roman Reigns or a Braun Strowman, and it feels like you're watching Great Khali and Hornswoggle. So everyone feels elevated and everyone feels bigger, and the noise is amazing, and it rivals AEW in a way that you wouldn't have imagined, and AEW can't have possibly legislated for, where it's almost like they look big and glossy in a negative way. When NXT is smashing this real quality, edgy match, it looks grittier than All Elite Wrestling, which was born from the embers of the independent scene. So I think that genuinely helps NXT's aesthetic. But but I don't think it's going to happen. I think they're going to go to arenas, and I just hope, like, if it's Triple H and Full Sail are in unison on something and they can't come to a deal, I hope they come to terms. I just hope that whoever wants to see this product put on the road to sell a few extra tickets isn't fooled by the short-sightedness of that decision.
Yeah. What do you think? You're obviously you've been a fan of NXT for a long time. You're obviously a fan of AEW as well. How would you feel about seeing NXT go leaving Full Sail?
I don't want to see it either, to be perfectly honest. I was watching Angel Garza versus Leo Rush last week, and it was just an exceptional pro wrestling match. And I think they worked that crowd reaction.
It's electric, wasn't it? Yeah.
Just standing on your end stuff.
There was so much hatred and animosity in that match, and it sort of swept over that audience who looked like they had like the blood at the lips, and they were like thirsty for it, and it was like just a genuine furnace, a cauldron of an atmosphere, and I think genuinely it's inimitable. And the last thing we want to see from NXT is it become a main roster show. You're not going to get a takeover size crowd every single week.
No.
So why bother trying to reach that, especially when there's no financial gain?
No.
AEW needs these houses to sustain itself. To become successful. NXT can carve out its own niche, and a lot of the talk originally was how in the Washington arena on the first Dynamite was like an 18,000 crowd or whatever it was compared to NXT. I understood that contrast and why people thought, oh well, you'd obviously go and watch AEW, it's the big time. I think the ratings have completely disproved that theory, because AEW clearly has more people there, the better lit, it just looks like a different presentation, but it's not affecting the way that the audience perceives either show.
Like through the screen.
Yeah, indeed. It's been completely overstated, in my opinion, and I feel like as someone who will look back in years to come at 2015 NXT with the same fondness as I do 2000 WWF and 1990 WWF, that it just feels like a bit of its heart would go away, and that would break my own.
Here's a question for you. If CM Punk returns to the ring next year,
Here's a thumbnail.
Is that a best? Is that a best or a worst case scenario?
Yeah, it's a best, man. I'm a big old Mark. Why would I not want to hear that music and see it's clobbering time and just watch that hideous elbow drop that he does one last time? Like, it's CM Punk. Like, I like wrestling, and I like loads of wrestling. And if you could, like, if Bret Hart could get in a time machine and wrestle one more time, without potentially doing irreparable damage, I'd want to see that as well. I don't mean to come across like a ghoul, but like, these were all my favourites once. So I don't understand sometimes the rationale of people, especially when it's in a wrestler's hands. It's one thing if it's been taken out of theirs for physical reasons or whatever, but like in CM Punk's case, if he just really wants to do it again, I don't really get the rationale of those that would think, oh no, yeah, you passed it, there's no place for you. There is a place for you now, because WrestleMania is about 7 hours long. Saudi Arabia will buy you 6 houses in Chicago, even at inflated rates. There isn't a stage that WWE can't give these guys now. This is not like the kind of the post-Attitude Era where they were just clamouring for every ex-WCW guy to pop a pay-per-view that month. This is the era. This is the exact era, I would say, post The Rock's comeback at the start of this decade. He showed this is the exact era for any wrestler to come back and do anything they like, and it might just work. It might be a catastrophe, and maybe that plays the anxieties of people that don't want to see him wreck a legacy. But I'm always game to see these guys try. Steve Austin the same, both of them.
With me, I think the whole he's ruining his legacy there is a little bit overstated, because when I think of Shawn Michaels, I don't think of his little daft bald head popping up in Saudi Arabia.
At least he was the one that knew it was a mess.
It's just fantastic. I think it's all very overstated. Something like The Undertaker, when he comes out, I'm like, oh, you should have retired a long time ago. But when I'm removed from the kind of mostly ugly spectacles that he insists on partaking in nowadays, I don't think, what a sad waste of a great career. I just think, what an absolutely fantastic career he's had. I can dip in and out of it with a wonderfully created WWE network whenever I wish. With CM Punk, it's maybe a bit different, because his entire aura, his character, his core is based around the fact that he just double-birded the machine. So for him to become absorbed back into it, I think they would have to handle it very carefully for me to not look at him a little bit differently, just because he himself asked me to for years and years and years. The way around that, in my opinion, is giving him complete creative control. And that deal they offered the Bucks and Kenny Omega, by all accounts, you can just get out if you think it's crap. That's how much we want you, or more to the point, that's how much we don't want AEW, New Japan, or ROH to have you. And at the end of the day, CM Punk could write an exponentially better storyline than any of those hacks or Vince McMahon could.
To play to that control, if he was going to ask for one thing, to play to everything we know about him going on last at WrestleMania. Like CM Punk gets the WrestleMania main event is a perfect right around for, he's gone back in the machine. Well, no, because the one thing he never got, he's managed to get it by strolling back in at the top of the card. That was the one thing that he was angry that The Rock was able to take from him, and all those others that he believed didn't deserve it. Like, for him to be able to do that as part of that story would be fantastic. Like, this is where you get people excited. You're like, so really what he has to do is turn up and win the Royal Rumble, guys? That's not going to happen. You know, he's not going to be pointing at a sign at the end of the January pay-per-view or anything like that.
He could with a massive crap-eating grin on his face, and it would be fantastic.
It would be brilliant, wouldn't it? But any way that he writes himself into that match in particular, knowing what we all know, would be fantastic, would be fan-serviced in the extreme, and it would sell 1 million of those, like, reissued white Chicago flag CM Punk shirts. Millions of them. WrestleMania.
The ice cream bars.
WrestleMania would be covered in it.
Other than Titus O'Neil and the Iconics get released, what is your worst case and best case scenarios, Wilborn? I'm more interested in what you have to say.
I genuinely haven't thought about this. Well, best case scenario is going to feed into a question I'm about to ask you, which is best and worst case scenarios for world champions next year. Actually, I'm just going to give that as my best and worst case scenarios for that. In fact, worst case scenario, Randy Orton becomes world champion again, because there's 100% something I can see them doing. If they're wrestling on Fox, they're being like, well, Randy Orton's famous, so just give him the world title, just completely negating the fact that it's so dull watching him wrestle. And best case scenario, again, this is pie in the sky. We're not going to include the Titus or the Iconics or anyone like that. Legitimately. Because it's something I think is like there's a 1% chance of it happening, as opposed to me saying Titus is going to main event WrestleMania, which is going to take a few years just yet. My best case scenario, Matt Riddle beats Brock Lesnar for the world title. It's not going to happen, I don't think. It's akin to CM Punk coming back and winning the Royal Rumble, but there's a tiny bit of me that sees them setting up Brock Lesnar versus bloody Cain Velasquez or Tyson Fury and goes, you want to do a real shoot MMA fight with someone who's got legitimate fighting ability and beef with people like Goldberg and stuff as well? It's right there. And like you say, if you can't get Matt Riddle right, give up.
Yeah, absolutely give up.
So you two, best and worst case scenarios for world champions. It doesn't have to be in WWE. It can be in AEW if you'd prefer.
I think worst case scenario, but not because I'm not in love with the idea of it, eventually would be getting the belt on Cody too soon after the Chris Jericho stipulation. I think they've got real value in him somehow working his way into a title shot. But if you do that within 12 months, it doesn't half open up a door that the AEW don't want to open, that they go back on their steps. It's brilliant writing when they eventually find a way to do that. But I just think anything beyond sort of 2 years is probably too soon, not least when they'll be building up a ton of other contenders for it. Best case for me, I'll probably look at WWE, because they've kind of already cycled through so many bad champions or disappointing champions. Would be at any point of the year, pick whichever time you like, Ronda Rousey comes back and becomes Raw or SmackDown Women's World Champ, wherever she's needed the most on top of a brand, because that run was perfect.
I'm not we're getting so far deep into the weeds of fantasy booking here, but can you imagine if Ronda Rousey came back, won one of the world titles, and Shayna Baszler was the other world champion heading into Survivor Series?
There are so many like blissful situations like that you create with Rousey, because brilliantly they left so much on the table the first time.
Michael Sidgwick.
My worst case scenario, through desperation, is that WWE stunt casts a champion a la Jinder Mahal. I don't know who potentially that could be.
Cain Velasquez at WrestleMania.
Someone like that, yeah. Just a way of trying to monetize a source of revenue that has gone sort of unmined, like the MMA crossover fans in the case of Cain Velasquez, or the Nation of India.
Really niche, I'll tell you right now. Not many people like me who likes both.
Every single comment I see on social media that looks like an MMA account with the old tap out bloody profile pictures. Shit sucks. Fake. Huh? So yeah, I don't think that exists either. Yeah, I just think that there might be yet more desperation, and WWE, in response to chronic ratings and popularity issues, tends not to go, all right, we'll just need to rebuild the infrastructure of creative. All right, great. No, they just go for a short-term thing. So my worry is that post-WrestleMania, there'll be another stunt, as there often is historically. Best case scenario for me, to prove once and for all just how much life there actually is in this just scene outside of WWE, is a meticulously plotted, earned, and really, really well done Kenny Omega win over Chris Jericho. I want to see what he can do. It was cut short through various factors in New Japan Pro Wrestling in 2018. What Kenny Omega can do is the ace in the face of a mainstream company in North America. I'd love to see it. I'd absolutely love to see it. I'm sick of people going, oh, he's just like an overrated, like goofy, jazz hands guy, or like he's not as good as people think he is. I think there's an actual genius there, and I think they're doing a very astute thing by diminishing his role, because he can't do what he did in New Japan in the same sphere as Chris Jericho doing it now. It brings them together too closely, so he has to have a diminished role. Once he services and becomes a complete main eventer in AEW, I just want to see him as the ace. Just let us know that he is, in fact, better than anything WWE can ever manage.
It's almost a minor tragedy that his reign in New Japan was never allowed to blossom because of like everything that was happening with All In and with the formation of AEW. There was always a sense that this is not really the right one, but it followed what loads of people would consider the greatest wrestling match of all time. So that was a really tricky first reign. I think they have the perfect opportunity to capitalise on that. It has made me think of one more thing, like a best case scenario for me personally. I want to see the improvement of a relationship between AEW and New Japan. I think it services both. I think them falling out or not being able to come to agreement on things doesn't benefit anybody. We can see with Wrestle Kingdom how it's going to benefit from having Moxley and Chris Jericho as a part of it. John Moxley in general is amazing in New Japan and would be a great loss if we never see him work that gimmick ever again. But there will be millions of other examples like that over the years if them two can forge a relationship, and it's to the betterment of both products. Getting the Elite back over in New Japan would be magic. There's so many things you can do with those two rosters if you allow them to overlap from time to time.
Well, gents, you've made me absolutely terrified and also really excited for next year, so thanks for that. Let us know your best and worst case scenarios for 2020 in wrestling in the comment section below. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to What Culture Wrestling on either iTunes, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts from, for daily wrestling podcasts. Plus, you can let us know your thoughts on Twitter at WhatCultureWWE. Watch there, follow all three of us. You can follow Michael Hamflett at
Michael Hamflett, because I'm never going to get my voice back, so I might as well just stick to tweeting.
Follow Michael Sidgwick at
Sidgwick.
You can follow me at Adam Wilborn. As I said, follow us all at WhatCultureWWE. This has been Get the Table. My thanks to the Dadley Boyz. Thank you for watching, and we will see you soon.